from the most scatterbrained, gibberish-talking goofball in all of media, Michael Eric Dyson. He has the incredible ability to spout sentences that are not only indecipherable on their face, but even if you could make sense of his schizophrenic ramblings, the points he thinks he's making are usually so asinine he would have been better off just not talking. Michael Eric Dyson sounds like Master Yoda's retarded cousin. Half of what he says is unintelligible, and the rest is unintelligent. Well, with Tiffany Cross now put out to pasture, I guess Dyson is hoping that maybe a slot's going to open up for him at MSNBC. And the golden ticket that's going to finally get him a steady paycheck from somebody. You know how these bootlicks are. They all got the exact same playbook. Just go ahead and trash black people, and there's going to be some white Democratic Party member, or there's going to be some white media corporation that's going to finally give you a steady paycheck. This is how you know that there's a program at work here. First, it was Golden Taylor posting articles in Rolling Stone saying that black anti-Semitism is ingrained. Of course, as you know, that website changed that particular headline just an hour later. And today, the New York Times is giving Michael Eric Dyson a platform to do the exact same thing. This is a steady drumbeat that the white media is keeping up. And you notice that they're using front Negroes to do it. Dyson even went so far as to accuse the black community of having Jew envy, as he put it. Have you ever heard of somebody who was envious of another person or another group and looked to do them any favors? That's the obvious subtext of what Dyson says, and then he tries to whitewash it by claiming that, well, these are largely due to economic factors in the country. That's sprinkling sugar on crap. But nonetheless, the reason the New York Times ran this op-ed is because it delivers the overarching narrative that they're trying to push, that the black community is inherently anti-Semitic. Sure, when you get past the lip service to, oh, well, there's economic factors at play, which is just meant as a means for the people who want to deny this propaganda being anti-black racist. Make the point that, well, see, they said it was economic, and it wasn't as bad as all that. Well, that's not true at all. This propaganda piece services its main mission, which is to remind everybody the black community has an end for the Jewish community. And here you got a black man who's saying it. If this quote-unquote black anti-Semitism is placing the Jewish community in such danger, why is it that nobody can ever give any examples of any of this danger? Shouldn't we be having thousands, if not dozens, of examples of black people running around harming Jewish people just because? And when exactly did this black anti-Semitism begin? Nobody seems able to ever answer those questions. And considering how much these bootlicks and the white media backing them keep trying to make it sound as if black people are putting the Jewish community in imminent danger, it sounds like they ought to be able to just rattle off chapter and verse how black people are harming the Jewish community, but they don't, because this is propaganda. Dyson's op-ed started off quoting from a rabbi in the 1960s who asked Dr. King what the black community is going to do about anti-Semitism. Well, it looks like Dyson found one after all, and he starts off his article with it. There's a damning confession if you ever heard one. Black people were clearly beating and killing Jewish people in the 1960s, and no doubt earlier than that. And that's what prompted this question. The long-standing and well-documented history of anti-Semitism by the black community. Right? Wrong. Because when you actually look at the quote that Dyson links to in his op-ed, you see that it's an excerpt taken from a book about Dr. King in '68. Apparently, the book was compiled by Dr. King himself from various conversations and interviews that he had conducted. Now, in this one particular passage that Dyson quotes, he took a question from Rabbi Everett Gindler. But when you look at it, you see that Gindler was not talking about anti-Semitism from the black community in general. He was instead complaining about what he called rabble-rousing from Stokely Carmichael, Adam Clayton Powell, and H. Rap Brown. And he wanted King to make them, quote, desist from their anti-Israel activity. So this quote that Dyson started his op-ed piece off with wasn't about the black community in general. In fact, it wasn't even about anti-Semitism. It was about a few black figures who opposed the actions of the Israeli government. And apparently, Rabbi Gindler felt that it was anti-Semitic for these black figures to characterize the Israeli government's actions as analogous to white oppressors. Well, that's not anti-Semitism. Israel is a nation. It's a geopolitical entity. It's not a race. It's not an ethnicity or a religion. So to oppose the actions of the Israeli government isn't anti-Semitic. That's just plain old political activism. The real question is if this rabbi had such a big problem with anything being said by H. Rap Brown, Carmichael, or Powell, why didn't he confront them about it? As black people, we're always being talked to as if we're just one big nigger and that every black person is the official spokesman for all black people everywhere. But of course, the people who do this, who walk up to a black person and say, why are black people like this? Why do black people think that? The people who do that, they never want a friendly conversation. It's always because they want to argue about something. They want to throw insults at us under the guise of, well, I just don't understand why black people blah, blah, blah. So Dyson starts off with a disingenuous premise. Because the rabbi and Michael Eric Dyson seem to conveniently forget that it was a black man, Walter White, who was key to helping get international support for the UN to recognize the state of Israel. Walter White was the one who had to go to certain African nations and get them to drop their opposition to recognizing Israel. And then, right after that, when the Arab world went to war with Israel, and Israel, not having any nuclear weapons, was on the verge of being wiped out, it was another black man, Ralph Bunche, who negotiated an end to that conflict. The white media will occasionally misreport that Dr. King was the first black recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, but that's not true. Ralph Bunche, for his work bringing an end to the Arab-Israeli War, was the first non-white recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he received it for helping to make sure that Israel wasn't erased by that war, which, if the Arabs had not been made to settle, is exactly what would have happened. Because at that point, Israel didn't have any nuclear weapons or even a formidable army. Without the work of black people, there would have been no Israel for Rabbi Gendler to falsely claim black people were being anti-Semitic against 20 years later. Rabbi Gendler's complaints never once mentioned Walter White or Ralph Bunche, and there was absolutely no mention of Bunche or White in Dyson's op-ed either. Keep in mind, the white media presents this blathering, blowhard Dyson as being some kind of intellectual. He reaches for some obscure passage in a book from the 1960s while totally ignoring the actual historical record that contradicts him from the 1940s. Dyson doesn't tell you what Rabbi Gendler was referring to or whom. Dyson instead does his part to help reinforce the lie that black people as a group, or certainly large groups of black people, practice a tradition of anti-Semitism. Now, of course, when it comes to talking about things taken out of context, that's one of the weakest ways to disable an argument. But the truth here, with Dyson, it actually fits. And this lie becomes particularly dangerous because this lie is used to equivocate all anti-black racism as being unimportant. And black people decrying the racism that we're subjected to, well, we should be dismissed because, after all, black people are just as racist as the very bigots they complain about. That's what everybody understands this kind of anti-black race baiting to be. Because if somebody is looking for a feeble rhetorical excuse to hide behind so they can rationalize dismissing anti-black racism, this lie about black anti-Semitism is made to order. And we've been seeing this the last couple of years, ever since black people began putting pressure on white power. First, the white media pushed the lie that black people are attacking Asians left, right, and center. This year, it's Kanye and Kyrie Irving are apparently the leading anti-Semites in America, and the black community as a whole has a culture of anti-Semitism. And all of this anti-Semitism for the black community is making life dangerous for Jewish Americans. But keep in mind, the anti-Semitism they point to is always words. In the case of Kyrie Irving, though, they say the anti-Semitism is that he refuses to say something. He refuses to say that he's an anti-Semite, and that's anti-Semitic. Dyson himself admits that in his propaganda piece. He says it. Irving didn't utter any anti-Semitic remarks. So clearly the definition of black anti-Semitism is anything you say or anything you don't say. What was Kyrie Irving's crime? Watching a video. Now this is a road that only goes one way. Anti-black movies, TV shows, and cartoons are considered classics in the US. Nobody's trying to track down the people who post online messages praising those hate tracks. Because many of the people that we see pretending to be outraged about Kanye and Kylie, these are the same people who consider D.W. Griffith's Birth of the Nation, the jazz singer, Song of the South, and other racist dreck to be classics. And they'd be the first ones ready to fight if you said that someone needs to be punished or otherwise excoriated for watching and endorsing those films. Well, I'm going to give you the facts on anti-Semitism that Dr. Dyson, the New York Times, and the rest of the white media refuse to talk about. And I don't have to go back to the 1940s or even the 1960s to find examples. We'll just look at what's happened in the last 20 years or so. Because as I recall, it wasn't black people who attacked a Jewish community center in 1999, forcing little elementary school-aged children to flee for their lives. It certainly wasn't a black person who shot up the U.S. Holocaust Museum in 2009, though it was a black man who gave his life defending the Jewish visitors to that museum. Is this the black anti-Semitism that Rabbi Gendler, Goldie Taylor, and Michael Eric Dyson keep on about? It wasn't black people who carried out the 2014 Jewish Community Center attack in Overland Park, Kansas, which killed 3 people. It wasn't black people who carried out the Tree of Life Synagogue massacre in 2018, in which 11 people were killed. In 2019, a man stormed Chabad of Poway Synagogue with an AR-15, killing 1 worshiper and wounding 3 others. It wasn't a black person who did that. Just last year, you had a mass brawl break out in Times Square when Jewish American and Palestinian Americans were literally fighting in the streets. I can't show you the video because YouTube would automatically restrict this video, but black people weren't the ones snatching flags from Jews who were there or beating people up. This is anti-Semitism. This is actual violence being carried out, not some words from a bipolar rapper or silence from a basketball player who did nothing wrong, by the way. The white media and their Negro minions, these bootlicks, they've got all of this outrage and all of this indignation for some words or for silence. But you notice that none of them is saying a word about actual actions, people being killed. They're not saying anything at all about that because that goes against the narrative. And the through line that all these rhetoricians keep spouting is that Kanye West has a young audience. Kyrie Irving has a young audience. They're the threat. Notice how the goalposts have moved. Okay, the threat's not Kanye West or his words. The threat is not Kyrie Irving's silence. I don't see how the hell Kyrie Irving is supposed to inspire or motivate or influence anyone to carry out any anti-Semitic violence when he's literally not saying anything. And of course, the people who have claimed this absurdity, they've been confronted on this, and now the talking point that they're using is, well, they know that Kanye's not going to do anything to harm anyone, and they know that Kyrie's not going to harm anyone either, but it's the young black people who listen to Kanye. It's the young black people who watch Kyrie Irving play. It's their fans, the young black men. They're the threat.
Judy Gold is a comedian and friend. She's also the author of Yes, I Can Say That. When they come to the comedians, we are all in trouble.
Jews are in a really scary place. And you think about Kanye, and you think about Ye, and you think about Kyrie, and you think about their reach. They have more followers than there are Jews in the world. We are 2% of the population of the United States, and we're 0.2% of the population in the entire world. So when you are sending a link about a movie that denies the Holocaust, it's not really a careful or thought out thing to do, especially when there's so few of us.
Nobody is blaming Black Americans for the Holocaust, but they are blaming Black athletes and Black artists for perpetuating anti-Semitic tropes.
Right.
That's what they were blaming him for. So
right.
he fudged that a little
right.
bit.
So yes, that didn't make sense to me.
Is this woman high? First of all, Kanye West can't even get his audience to vote for him for president. All he can do is get them to buy his albums. That's it. And as for Kyrie Irving, where is this band of no doubt basketball thumping black males who he's inspired to go out and commit acts of anti-Semitic violence? That brings us to the second point, and most importantly, the central lie being pushed is that young black males are a threat. That's the message that's pushed loudly and clearly. It's not Kanye who they're worried about. It's all the young black people, specifically young black males who listen to his music. Who have these dangerous young black fans of Kanye and Kyrie harmed? No one, but they're dangerous. Well, who have they threatened? No one, but they're dangerous. Well, have they even spoken out of turn to anyone? No, but they're still dangerous. So the goalposts have gotten up and grown legs. First, it was about what Kanye said. Then it was about Kyrie Irving's choice of viewing material on Amazon and what he didn't say. And finally, now we're talking about Kanye and Kyrie's fans who have not said anything, haven't done anything, haven't looked at anything questionable on Amazon or at all. The problem with the fans is these young black males exist. You can't point to what they've done. You can't point to what they've said. You can't point to anything. The problem, they exist. Their fans exist. These young black males exist. That's the threat. That's the threat. These young black males exist. I don't know about anti-Semitic, but that's anti-black for sure. The people who tell these lies about young black men like Goldie Taylor or Judy Gold, they are the dangerous ones. And it's not merely words. There's a proven track record of how this kind of rhetoric directly leads to anti-black violence. This is how America has always justified harming and even killing black children. It's America's favorite catch-all excuse for harming black people. And there's no act of anti-black violence that's so egregious, so wrong, so unjustified that they can't use it. Armed with this lie, white mobs devastated black townships like Tulsa and Rosewood, killing thousands of black people. In 1931, the lie of black males being dangerous led to the Scottsboro boys being falsely accused of raping 2 white women on a train. These boys were teenagers between the ages of 13 and 19, and yet they were convicted based on nothing other than a lie. And 8 of those 9 boys were sentenced to death. The Scottsboro boys would eventually be exonerated and released, but the lie of black males being dangerous, being used as a justification to harm black children, would continue. In 1955, Emmett Till would be kidnapped and tortured to death after a white woman falsely accused him of whistling at her. She, by the way, is still alive, but the government refuses to hold her accountable. And while the white media falsely claims that this satanic crime awakened the nation to the evils of racism, the reality is nothing changed. In 1984, Bernie Goetz shot 4 black teenagers. He claimed that they were trying to rob him. But as it turned out, at least one of the youngsters was hiding when Goetz went on his shooting spree. Goetz was so terrified of these dangerous black teenage males that he calmly walked up to one of them and said, "You don't look too bad, here's another," before he shot the young man in the back, paralyzing him and inflicting permanent brain damage. In 1989, the Central Park Five were falsely accused of raping a white woman. Even after the real assailant was caught and the case roundly proven to have been a racist lie, Michael Bloomberg stonewalled any efforts to make restitution to the victims of that racist lie. And it goes on. The lie about young black males being dangerous just because has been used to justify the murders of Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, etc. So when people like Judy Gold push the lie that it's Kanye's listeners, it's Kyrie's fans, they're the threat, she knows exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly the racist well that she's drawing from. However, whereas Judy Gold was oblique about her anti-black dog whistling, Goldie Taylor wasn't oblique about it at all. She came right up the middle and said what she knows the white media wants to hear. Young black males are the threat. And we see that they're making sure to get black people to push this lie. That way they can at least hide behind these crash guns and say, see, you can't point the dirty into the stick of the white media. Why? It's Michael Dyson saying it, and it's Goldie Taylor saying it. Speaking of Dyson, in his op-ed, he ranted about the Hebrew Israelites and other irrelevant points. Well, if we're going to be talking about anti-Semitism, then we're going to talk about all of it. Because what I want to know is, how are black Jews, such as the Ethiopian Jews, treated in Israel? Are they not Semites? Because while I have a hard time finding any examples of this much talked about black anti-Semitism, I had no problem at all finding lots of examples of Israeli anti-black racism. There's your anti-Semitism, and it actually exists. Not based on words, but based on actions. Not based on what somebody might do, but based on what's actually been done and why it happened. Now, people like Dyson, who spend far too much time around a poor element, they try to rationalize the lies that they tell about the black community by basically saying, well, we're all human beings, and as such, we are all prone to the exact same shortcomings and failings and moral flaws. Why, we're all exactly the same. Human beings are at base the same, but power is what defines human interaction. And when it comes to power, we are not remotely the same. Where is the trans-European slave trade, where black people were bringing Europeans into Africa and writing laws saying that these are not human beings? Where's the white equivalent of the Scottsboro Boys, where 9 white boys were falsely accused of raping 2 black women, and then a jury comprised entirely of black men sentenced those 9 white boys to death? When has that ever happened? When has a white boy been kidnapped, tortured to death, and his body dumped by a gang of black men who said we did because he whistled at a black woman? When have 5 white teenagers been accused of raping a black female jogger, then spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit, only to be proven totally innocent? And not only was the DA who wrongly prosecuted them not stripped of their law license and sent to prison, but the mayor defiantly fought to make sure that they were never paid a settlement. Because with the Duke lacrosse team, that's exactly what happened. Mike Nifong, he lost his law degree and his freedom. And none of the Duke lacrosse players spent even a day in jail. And nobody would dare fight to deny them a settlement of any sort. When has a black police officer shot a 9-year-old white boy playing in a playground and not even been prosecuted for it? Because that's exactly what happened with Tamir Rice. No, we are not the same, because this society is defined by anti-black racism and it doesn't treat us all the same. Now, that's all what happened this morning. But as of this recording, Kyrie Irving has reportedly apologized. For what, though, I don't know. Meanwhile, Amazon's not being lectured or described as a hotbed of anti-Semitism, and all the blackface and other anti-black racist movies are freely available on that website, and nobody's going after the people who buy those hate tracks. This is about reminding the country who the designated enemy is. It doesn't matter who's actually shooting up the synagogues, community centers, and Holocaust museums. And those, by the way, were just high-profile anti-Semitic mass shootings in the last 20 years that happened in public places. That's just a few of them. It's not by any stretch of the imagination comprehensive. And the list of anti-Semitic violence gets a lot worse when you talk about individual acts of violence and killings that were carried out. There is a violent anti-Semitic threat in American society, but Goldie Taylor, Judy Gold, and Michael Eric Dyson are saying nothing about it. Judy Gold, Goldie Taylor, and Michael Eric Dyson are liars and cowards. It's easy and cowardly to level false accusations at the most powerless segment of the society and to repeat lies that have been used for over a century to justify the false incarceration and even murder of black children. It's easy to do so because there's no punishment for it. In fact, you get praised for it. You get elevated in political and corporate circles for doing so. Well, we have to push back against these anti-black narratives, because of people who won't say anything while the society demonizes their children literally for doing nothing are also a people who won't do anything when those same forces harm their children. And make no mistake, the anti-black propaganda coming from the Judy Golds, the Michael Eric Dysons, and the Goldie Taylors is meant to do exactly that. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Eve, Codified Trucking, Morris Bodden, Black to Death, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.